sources close to the King were telling me that he was deeply aggrieved that Andrew hadn't made any reference in his public statement to extending sympathies to Epstein's victims. What followed was a statement from Buckingham Palace saying that both their majesties had their sympathy with Epstein's victims.
The Queen has told survivors of sexual violence that women who hadn't been believed were not alone. She said she stood with them today and every day. Who might she have been thinking about? Her brother-in-law, Andrew, paid millions in damages to Virginia Giuffre, a woman who said she'd been abused by Andrew but wasn't believed. He has denied any wrongdoing. Well, Kate Mansey is the royal editor of The Times and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
I mean, how should we read the remarks from the Queen yesterday?
Look, I was told that this was her most deep intervention yet when it comes to the Epstein scandal. She didn't mince her words. She didn't mention Jeffrey Epstein's name, nor that of her brother-in-law, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. But what she did do was express solidarity with all the victims, and she said that they should be believed. And I think this is the strongest sign yet that we've had from Queen Camilla about the Epstein scandal. Now, I know back in October when Andrew lost his titles, the King was... Sources close to the King were telling me that he was deeply aggrieved that Andrew hadn't made any reference in his public statement to extending sympathies to Epstein's victims. What followed was a statement from Buckingham Palace saying that both their majesties had their sympathy with Epstein's victims. And here we see again Camilla at the Women of the World International Festival saying, just she stood in solidarity with victims before. She's talked about when she was a teenager, fighting off a sex attack on a train. And I think this is something that she's been campaigning on for over a decade and is going to do so. Now, we saw her at Westminster Abbey on Monday for the Commonwealth Day service. As the royal family were piling in, there was a huge protest outside by Republic, the anti-monarchy group, and a lot of their slogans and placards and shouting were all about Andrew and Epstein. Pictures of Andrew that were released as part of those Epstein files were on placards and posters, and they were shouting, what did you know to the royal family? So this is something that continues to dog them, and they're going to try to maneuver their way through this kind of PR disaster.
And what's the reaction to it been? I mean, is it broadly welcomed that she's speaking out in this way, or do people have their doubts or their concerns about, this Queen talking about believing women when we know that, the previous Queen did help pay millions of pounds to buy an alleged victim off, essentially?
Yeah, that's right. When Virginia Giuffre accused Andrew of a sex attack, the Queen did help pay that £12 million. The late Queen did help pay that £12 million to settle the case out of court. Now, of course, Andrew's always denied wrongdoing. There was no admission of liability with that court settlement. But Virginia Giuffre, who died by suicide, is no longer here to tell her side of the story. So I think it does continue to dog them. I think as they move forward, there is a lot of support for what Camilla's saying. Last month she met Giselle Pellicot, the French rape survivor, who waived her anonymity and has written a book about her awful ordeal where she was abused by her ex-husband and 50 men. Yesterday at St James's Palace for this reception the Queen was hosting, there was an awful lot of support there for her. Dame Helen Mirren was there. An interesting told an anecdote about as she was on her way to mark International Women's Day, the driver said to Dame Helen, when's it going to be International Men's Day? And she said, that's every day. That's 365 days of the year. So there is a lot of support around.
Kate Mansey, have we lost you? Or are you still there? I think we might have lost her.
I've nudged the mute. She's still there. I think she might have nudged the mute button.
There may be a mute button involved. That was Kate Mansey, the royal editor of The Times there, giving us the reaction to the Queen and that speech about survivors of sexual violence.